So you know the 5 keys that cause a false confession? Let's talk about it in this episode number 36 of 101 Tips for Interviewers and Interrogators. Welcome back to tip number 36 on interviewing and interrogation. Let's talk about that dreaded F word. Yeah, not that one, false confessions. Are you aware of the 5 primary keys, primary elements that contribute to a false confession case? Let's take a look at the data first. At the time of this recording, there were 331 cases worked on by the Innocence Project where the convictions were overturned using DNA. Okay, so the exoneration is the result of DNA evidence to prove that individual who had been convicted had been wrongly convicted. Of those 331 cases, 25% of them, the case there was a false confession. 1 out of 4, there was a false confession. The DNA later proved that individual was in fact innocent of the crime. So it leads right back to the training and techniques used by the interviewers. Now there's 5 primary keys that we can control. Now there's things that we're not going to talk about in this segment because that's another field of expertise. We're not going to talk about contamination of evidence or chain of custody, prosecutorial error, the media. We're not going to talk about those type of things. Let's talk about, particularly in interviewing and interrogation, what is it that we're doing and can change directly that will affect whether we have a valid confession or coerced or false confession. Okay, so first thing to consider, number 1, is what Dr. Gisli Gudjonsson calls suggestibility factors. He's done extensive research on those cases of false confession worldwide and find that there are groups of people and people with specific types of conditions or situations that are far more vulnerable or suggestible to falling into the trap of a false or coerced confession. Now those groups include children. Now that age range can vary, obviously for the little bitty guys, 12 to 15 years old is not unusual, and possibly up to 18 years old. It's part of the decision-making process that those children had developed up to that point. And depending on their socialization skills, their awareness of nature of behavior in legal issues, they don't understand the ramifications of some of their statements. And so they're very easy to be controlled by a very powerful adult. They don't understand that the decision to make, that the outcomes could be negative for them, they could be very detrimental. Another group that's within that is going to be the mentally deficient. The clinical breakpoint is about an IQ of 70, but you're still at risk, some 72, 74, and so forth, and obviously below that. Once again, you have a situation where the individual is not very good at decision making and do not appreciate the ramifications of their decisions. And some of their ways they think of solving the problem are just very impractical. And so they don't have those social skills. They may also be very vulnerable to the authority or the position or the title or the power of the situation or the setting that they're in. They're very, very vulnerable to that. So those two we want to be very careful of when we start to dealing with suggestibility. For example, sometimes race can become involved, sometimes gender become involved. Obviously, education is involved. Lower socialization skills can be involved. There's a lot of variables. Now, you also see sometimes with psychotics. You can also see folks, now we talked about the very young, but also the very, very old or much older, where you have people who have problems with dementia or Alzheimer's or type of organic brain disorders, or individuals at any age range who have some type of traumatic brain injury, tumors, and so forth. The way we overcome that, we're going to cover in just a few moments, is the method and technique of way we're interviewing. And we can build in some safeguards that will help protect us from that. Second thing we need to look at, the length of the interview. Had a radio station, matter of fact, it was NPR contact me, and they were doing a story on false confessions. Somehow someone told them, I don't know where this came from, and they didn't confide in me as to where, they just questioned me on this part. The person had told them that interviews are not successful until after you've gone at least 6 hours with the subject. I don't know where that came from. In fact, all the research and data I show that I can find on the length of, comparing the length of interviews with the nature of false or coerced confessions, that a 6-hour point, beyond that, there's an exponential increase in risk in getting a coerced or false statement. Now you get, person gets tired, they get to the point where they're feeling trapped, They feel maybe the only way to get out of this is to confess, and later it will work out. Later the truth will come out, or I'll be able to get to court, or someone will be able to tell the truth on this, and I'll be cleared on it. So it exponentially increases after 6 hours. Now, this doesn't mean magically at 6 hours and 1 minute, you're screwed. That's not it. But look at the length of your interview. What I would recommend, be sure you give plenty of time breaks for the subject. Be sure you document bathroom breaks. Be sure you get them at a point where they can walk away and get out of the room. I know that a lot of times we're taught, keep the person incommunicado, don't let them get around anyone, don't let them talk to anyone, and so forth. I understand contaminating statements. Now, remember, some of this also includes our interviews not only of suspects, but also victims and witnesses are vulnerable here to us contaminating their statements, which is another big contributing factor to a wrongful conviction. So make sure you got those break periods and break times in there. Length of interviews average, I've seen everything from 6 minutes to 360 minutes has been the average time. But you start going longer, you get into exhaustion, get the person worn down. So start thinking about that and make sure you get those break times in there and watch the clock and see how long you're going. This is also good why you should record your interviews. Now, number 3, let's talk about the things, specifically the tactics of the interviewer. The interview itself, one major contributing factor is misdiagnosing deception. Now, the danger of this, number 1, some of the things that we're taught in our academies and some of the training programs I've seen, and I've alluded to you many of the screwy ones that are around. Go look at my other video about the bizarre training course and see what I mean. Many of the things we're teaching as lie signs have been proven to be scientifically wrong. Here's the problem. If you make an assessment and say this person has to be lying, and you're reading the wrong cue or interpreting it wrongly, you're falling into a great risk of what's called confirmation bias. I call it the Bigfoot syndrome. Once you think you see the subject's lying or you believe they're lying, then everything else is a lie. Just like people hunting for Bigfoot. You know, they want to prove he exists. So every little mark and hair, clump of hair and dropping and scratch on a tree becomes a sign of Bigfoot. So we've got to be very cautious in our diagnosis of deception. We can do better that with a narrative-based interview. Go back and look at some other training programs I have on our on-demand training about the narrative-based format. This reduces that risk of deception. And we need to correct many of the stuff that we're teaching in academies because we're perpetuating many of these myths, and I've seen them in major publications, even including one, for example, I saw one sometime back in Police One, where the article was full of inaccurate statements about deception behaviors, including stuff like eye contact. Third problem that we have, false confession, we're contaminating the subject. Subject meaning not only suspect, but victim witness. When are you deploying and using evidence? When do you bring that up? The accusatory style, confrontational style has always said bring it up early, overwhelm the subject, make them feel that their resistance is futile, that the case is overwhelming against them. The problem is, 2 contributing factors. You're contaminating the subject by giving them information ahead of time. We're looking to see what they know, not an echo effect of hearing back what we have told them. And it's easy to contaminate them. So when you think you're getting information, you're actually hearing your own information back. Look a few episodes back. Look for, do you employ SUE, S-U-E, strategic use of evidence? Go back and look at that video. And you'll see we talk about we hold the evidence as long as possible. Now here's 2 benefits from it. Number 1, holding it longer, you do a better job of spotting deception. Investigators who hold the evidence as long as absolutely possible are hitting an average of 68% identification deception. Inmates are the ones that do that good, professional liars, if you will. So hold that evidence as long as possible. Let the subject narrate, then bring one piece out at a time. All right, finally, our 5th key. Okay, we had suggestibility, length of time, misdiagnosing deception. We had contamination. The 5th piece is coercion. If you're interrupting your subject, if you're stopping them from saying no, if you're giving them dialogues or giving them scenarios, this is what you did. You are coercing your subject, despite what these folks are telling you. That is coercion. In coercion, I'm telling them, you will give me this information or else. If you do not help, this is going to go bad for you. when I leave this room, if you haven't talked to me, I'll do my best to see that you're buried and you go to prison for this. This is the death penalty case or the life penalty case. Those are coercive tactics. It's when you as the interviewer are using your position or your power of office to put the person in a position that they must cooperate, or you will turn loose the hounds of hell on them, if you will, by a bureaucracy. That is coercion. Manipulation, one step down. Both those cases, the advantage is totally toward the interviewer. Look for a future program coming up on on-demand training. I'm going to prepare about the ethical use of influence. In persuasion, ethical persuasion, we're allowing the subject to talk, and whoever has the better logical argument has the better response. If you're coercing the subject, hitting them with evidence, trying to control them, dominate them, you are using coercive tactics, and it means you're not prepared as the interviewer. So take a look at those 5 keys again. Number 1, suggestibility of the subject. Number 2, the length of time of the interview. Number 3, misdiagnosing deception. Number 4 is going to be the contamination of the subject with evidence. And number 5, coercive tactics. Those are the contributors to wrongful convictions, false confessions, and contaminated statements by subjects. Glad to be with you. Now, be sure again, please hit the subscribe button. You notice these programs are important, small keys. My goal, until every interviewer is the go-to investigator. That's what I want. That you're the one who's the investigator, that when it comes time they want information, you're the one who will get one where the information is rich and it'll stand up. Hit the subscribe button. Look over here to the left, some more on-demand training programs. It's critical that we try to change the culture of interview and interrogation. We're working for the victims, and getting false and wrongful convictions is not the way to do it. Thanks for joining me here for tip number 36. See you next time for our next tip. Be safe.